started. There's our bells. Okay, great. That means it's time to get going. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Art History Encounters, where every Sunday we discuss a topic connected to the art and culture, of course, of the Italian Renaissance. I am Elaine Ruffalo. I created this program. I'm your host. I also am an art historian. I teach in Florence, Italy. For those of you who have not been with me before, I'm coming to you from Florence, Italy, and very happy to bring the art and culture to your homes. I also welcome Kevin Barnett, my friend, my colleague. He's in Florence with me as well, and he is the expert of all things technological. Thank you, Kevin, as always, for joining me these many, many months and making sure that our program runs smoothly and professionally. I appreciate you, I really do. This program is, of course, made possible through your donations, and I thank all of you donors for your generosity and also for spreading the word, which is, important to say the least. I was checking my numbers, just perusing through. I started this back in March, and I had 50 participants, and now we are over 3,000 people who are subscribed to Art History Encounters, which is just fantastic and says a lot about you and your dedication to the Italian Renaissance. So consider donating what you can, but also please consider spreading the word, which really helps my program go forward, because the more people, obviously, the more donations as we go along. Okay, so now let's turn, because I got a lot of material to get into, so I'm going to get going right away to our topic, which is the Medici, bankers to popes. And we are now going to part 2 of a 3-part series that I started last week. And last week, I discussed the origins of the Medici. I discussed the business of banking. I talked extensively about the specialness of Giovanni de' Medici and his whole rags to riches story. Then we covered, of course, Cosimo de' Medici and his consolidation of the family fortune and, of course, their power, and how he was able to justify their wealth through his patronage of the arts. Then we looked quickly at his son, Piero the Gauti, who continued the family dynasty. Now let's have a look. Here's the Medici coat of arms, reviewing a little bit from last week. You remember this crest, which is I think, quite a lovely crest in its simplicity. Also the stone that it's carved upon is called pietra serena, that typical ubiquitous stone used in Florence. And the family crest are balls. Now the balls either represent coins, they could also represent the pawnbroker's balls, they might represent testicles. What's important is every time you see these balls in Florence, you know that the Medici have been involved in the patronage of that work of art or architecture. Immediately recognizable, it is their brand for sure. And you'll recall that the Medici, when they walked through the streets of Florence, their fans, their followers would chant palle, palle, which of course means balls, balls, which I've always thought was rather disconcerting. In any case, Medici balls, Medici patronage. But then, to remind you, some other ways that the Medici are going to consolidate power, a little bit more subtle, is through marriage and diplomatic ties. And this is just an idea or a selection of the Medici and their consorts. So for example, on your left, you can see Cosimo, who marries Contessina Bardi, and Piero, who marries Lucrezia Tornabuoni. And Lorenzo the Medici marries an Orsini girl, and Piero Fatuoso marries another Orsini girl. I like this selection because the upper two, the older Medici, Cosimo and Piero, they're going to marry local girls, right? They're going to marry from the Florentine girls, consolidating ties with those important families, such as the Bardi, who a lot of you recognize that name. Those are the first bankers of Florence. Tornabuoni, of course. But then already looking down towards Orsini, those are Roman names. And you can already tell with Lorenzo the Magnificent, they're going to start to look towards the south for their alliances. Marriage is important, and as is patronage of different works of art. And each of those Medici, last week we talked about, are going to be paying for different kinds of works of art. Giving you a smattering of examples. Over here on the left-hand side, in this kind of curious Baroque look that was added later, is a tabernacle which houses a miraculous image paid for by the Medici. Then in the center, I can see a wonderful image of David and Goliath, which is a public political symbol paid for by the Medici. The Medici lived here, of course, in Palazzo Medici. There's their funerary chapel we talked about extensively last week. Here we can see a ciborium that houses a miraculous image, an image of St. Lucy, and even small gems and small objects. All of this is going to disperse the Medici brand throughout Florence and again justify their wealth. All right, so that's kind of an overall look at those earlier Medici. But now let's start to get into this period that we're going to call the Golden Age of Florence. So come up closer to your screen and have a look at these beautiful images that I have prepared for you. On your left is Piero de' Medici, also known as Piero the Gouty, because he suffered from gout. Debilitating disease, spent most of his time in bed. And on your right, Lorenzo il Magnifico with their dates. Now, Piero died in 1469, and his son succeeded him when he was only 21 years old. And here's our Lorenzo. And Lorenzo was one of the most remarkable characters of the Renaissance. He was truly gifted. He had exquisite taste, great humanity. He was kind of a Republican prince. You know, that's an oxymoron, especially in Florence, which abhors absolute power or any kind of aristocracy. But Lorenzo was recognized as the unofficial Prince of Florence, and he was well-loved, well respected by most, not all, Florentines. Lorenzo took on the title Il Magnifico, which means Lorenzo the Magnificent, which always makes me laugh because he gave himself that name. Just one day decided, I'm going to sign my letters Il Magnifico, which gives you a little bit of idea. You know, he's quite sure of himself. And yeah, of course, Lorenzo was born way ahead of the game, with a silver spoon in his mouth. I always think about Lorenzo the Magnificent as a little bit like John F. Kennedy. Yeah, and like JFK, he ushered in a period that was like Camelot in Florence, what we'll call the golden age of Florence under Lorenzo. Just giving you another image of Lorenzo. I like this particular work because if you look closely, you can see just behind Lorenzo is in the distance. There's the city walls of Florence, pretty well done. Over here in the deep background, you can see the Cathedral of Florence, the hills of Fiesole. Lorenzo is standing here next to a tree, which of course happens to be a laurel tree, laurel for Lorenzo. And down below, you can see him here with his cell phone in his right hand, giving you an idea of what Lorenzo looked like. Now, because of Lorenzo's father's illness, gout, Lorenzo took on responsibility at a very young age. He was forced to mature very quickly. He was given a humanist education, and his teachers were the brightest lights in Italy and Europe. He was an apt pupil. He wrote beautifully in Latin and in Greek. He was a talented poet. He loved philosophy. He collected books like his grandfather, but he also just loved to laugh and tell bawdy stories. So Lorenzo was able to mix comfortably with the aristocracy of Florence, but also rub shoulders with the more simple Florentines on the streets. And the people of Florence regarded him in a much better light than they regarded his father. And, the poor father was always in bed, sick. Lorenzo was out in the streets. He was not pretentious, and he walked through the streets unaccompanied, like his grandfather, Cosimo. Now, Lorenzo, as I mentioned earlier, he's going to marry an Orsini girl. Orsini are Roman nobility. And the match was made thanks to Lorenzo's grandfather, Cosimo, with an eye towards making an alliance in Rome, because the Medici already had their eye on the south in Rome, and that would be, of course, the papacy. And they knew that they needed some Roman families behind them if they were ever going to see that day. Now, was it a happy marriage? Probably not. Not much written about the relationship between Lorenzo and Clarice Orsini. We know that Clarice Orsini was incredibly devout, and she was a little bit cool, reserved. And Lorenzo, who I always imagine was much more of a bon vivant, I can't imagine how he was too, but of course it was not a love match. It was much more a match, again, for power.